posterity. We'll have this recorded. It'll be awesome. And whenever you're ready, Mark, you take it away.
All right. Well, thank you, John, and welcome this afternoon. We're just going to talk about things that we might know, things that we should know about copyright. What I'll do first is I'll share my screen. Even before that, into the chat, I'm just going to put a link for the presentation, and you can use that and follow along with that, or you can just watch on the screen, whichever you prefer. I do have videos in this presentation, or videos linked in this presentation, but I don't plan on showing any of those now, so you can just go through those at a later time, because it just does not work to try and show a video. Audio works sometimes, but video together with audio, no, not going to happen. So let me share my screen and we'll get started. So distance learning and copyright, we've all found out that as we were trying to jump into this distance learning last spring, that all these publishers and software companies were just so eager to let us use their stuff for free, and no problems with copyright, and everything was free. And then as the summer went on and we were kind of in a hybrid mode for this fall, things were starting to change a little bit. And I think it was Sarah or somebody this morning said that, once we get back into this coming fall, are things going to get back to, let's say, normal again, where we really have to concentrate on what we are using in our distance learning classes and our face-to-face classes. So this is just a quick overview of what is out there, what we are responsible for, and different ways that we can use copyrighted content, either in face-to-face or into our distance learning hybrid classes. So a little bit of background, a little bit of history. 1976 was the first major revision, since the law was since 1909. So quite a few years before anything really changed. And if you think back to 1976, if you were teaching like I was in 76, if you were in school, if you weren't even around yet, what kind of technology did teachers?
You're really dating yourself there, Mr. Johnson.
Oh, yeah. Well, I've got no problem with that.
Nope.
So, I've been doing this quite a while. But in 1976, what kind of technology was there available to even worry about, making copies? Well, there's a, photocopy machine. There was the mimeograph machine. We did have videotape, but I think it was more like the reel-to-reel videotapes back then. 1978, I think it was. MEC was coming out with Odell Lake and let's see, Oregon Trail, 1973. So if anybody's played Oregon Trail or Odell Lake, or I think it was Math Munchers, those kind of games were computer games, but still not quite the technology that we've got today. But what they did was come up with 3 different sections that kind of talk about the fair use, the copyright, and so on. So Section 107 was fair use. How can you use copyrighted materials without paying for it? Well, you can use it for criticisms, commentaries, for news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Very specific uses under the term fair use. Section 108 had to do with libraries and copying materials for non-commercial use, meaning nobody's going to make a profit from it, and for interlibrary loans, sending materials back and forth. Then section 110 had to do with more what we are concerned with the teaching part of it. And subsection 1 was for basically physical face-to-face classrooms. And then subsection 2 talked about ways that you could use copyrighted materials, nonprofit and online or distance learning. So those are the kind of sections that we are interested in right now. So if we look at 2002, they updated section 110 subsection 2 of the copyright law with what is called the TEACH Act. And that had provisions that educators could use copyrighted materials for distance learning with certain restrictions. Some people kind of forget that part, that there are restrictions to using this. You can't just say, well, I thought it was under the TEACH Act, or I thought it was fair use. Well, there are specific things that you have to look for in these to qualify for using them under those things. So TEACH Act, facilitated performance, and copyrighted materials for distance education. So that's kind of a big thing with what we are doing now. Fair use, where you have the conditions where a limited use of copyrighted materials is a law without obtaining permission. So that's very important there, that it's a limited use. You can't use a full Disney movie. You can't use a whole book. You can use sections, you can use small parts of it. And then my favorite is asking for permission or getting a license to use whatever it is that you're using. So 3 different things that could help you qualify for using something legally in your classroom that somebody else created. So now we'll take a closer look at each of these and kind of give you some ideas of how they can be used in class, how they can be acceptable. And at the top of each of these 3, I do have a checklist that I'll reference in just a few minutes, but let's go through just the basics of these first. So for using the TEACH Act, the work that you're using must be legally obtained. That means you can't make a copy of a copy. You can't buy a pirated copy off the streets. You can't rip a CD. You can't rip a DVD. So it has to be lawfully obtained. Second thing is limitation on how much you're using. You can't use the whole thing. You can use what is only needed for what your educational purpose is. And it must be important to the content of your class and your curriculum. Then limiting it to just access to the students that are in your class. You can't just put it on your teacher website so that the whole world has access to it. You could put it behind your LMS so that just the students enrolled in your class would have access. Now, under that, there are 3 things, and the first one was very interesting to me, that the schools must have a copyright policy. And this is something we'll talk about later, but I've been kind of doing some research on that because that's a topic that's come up for us a couple of times. And finding a template, finding examples was not very easy for what other schools are doing for their copyright policies. And they say no downloading to the student devices. So you can't take your copy, students download it, which means they've made a copy. They can access it and use it from your LMS, from your behind a firewall type website, but they shouldn't be able to download it to their devices. But it can be asynchronous, which means that the students can access it when they need to, or if they are working differently from when the class meets and they want to work on it overnight or whatever, that is permitted. And this TEACH Act says it does not include materials that you would normally buy for students, consumables. So textbooks, workbooks, recordings, sheet music, that kind of stuff would not be permissible. So let me pop out of this a sec and go to that checklist. This is from the University of Texas Libraries, and a lot of my resources for this come from the university level. Very few high schools have, or school districts have, the amount of content that the colleges and universities do. But basically, this is just going down the checklist and checking what pertains to what you're trying to use this copyrighted material for. Is your institution nonprofit? Check. Does it have a policy on copyrighted materials? Uncheck, or say no. And then just go down and see how many of these fit what you're trying to do. And then you can just kind of decide, okay, is this use proper for what I want to use it for? Would this be allowed under the Teach Act? And you could take this and modify it to fit what you're doing or what your situation is in, but it just kind of gives you some things to think about as you're going through this. And as I'm going through this, if you've got questions, please unmute, stop me, ask. If you've got something to add to it, that'd be great too. So back to this. Under fair use, again, a checklist that we'll look at after we go through these. Here's the first video. I'm not going to play it now, but you can play it on your own when you get a chance. It's fairly quick, simple, 7 words that describe what fair use is. And they basically talk about these 4 main points. What is the purpose and character of the use? Educational by itself is not going to necessarily make it a fair use. If it's transformative, then yes, that more has a better chance of being considered a fair use. Is it a new expression? Is it a satire or parody? Does it change or make it into a new meaning or a new message? Then the nature of the copyrighted work. If it's a primary and factual versus creative, that will make a difference. So scholarly papers, technical material would have a better chance of being under fair use than something that's created, like plays or musicals or paintings. The amount is very important. How much are you using of the work? Less is better. So 50% versus 10%, 50% would be less likely to be fair use. And is the portion that you're using the main part of the copyrighted material? Is it the heart of the story? Well, I'm just going to show The Wizard of Oz, and I'll just show the parts that are in color, which is the whole middle of the movie, not the black and white at the beginning and the end. So that probably would not fall under fair use. And what is the effect on the copyright holder? Does this depreciate the value of their work? Does it make it less valuable now that you've made 75 copies for your class where you could have purchased 75 copies? So then if we look at the fair use for checklist, you can see this is set up pretty nice where in this column, these would count as fair use. So you could check off any of those that fit: personal study, criticism, teaching. But on this side, if it was for commercial or profit or bad faith behavior, then not so much. And then the second part, nature, check those off. See which side it falls on. The amount that you're using. Is it a small portion? Is it a large portion? Is it tailored to fit your purpose, your curriculum, your lesson? Or is it just kind of a general, oh, you guys earned a movie Friday, so let's show something from Disney. And then at the bottom, you kind of have a determination by checking these things off. Does it fit more under, yes, it's fair use, or no, it's not? So another thing to kind of help teachers decide if what they are doing falls under fair use. And permission. this is probably the best way to go if the other ways don't fit. Let's say you're trying to use something for a class and it really doesn't fit under the Teach Act, it really doesn't fit under fair use, then contact the owner of the copyright and ask permission. Can I use this? And here's what I'm going to do with it. Here's what I'm going to use. So the best way to do that is to find out who holds the copyright. Is it an individual? Is it a person that created the work? Or have they sold their rights to a publisher and now they own the copyright? A lot of times, if it's a book, a magazine, a publication, check the publisher's website to see what steps they have in place to request a license or permission. And then when you do contact them, include all the pertinent information that you can think of. What is the nature of your project? What is the material you're using? How long do you plan to use it? Where is it going to be used? Who would have access to it? All these different things to think about. And important, plan ahead. Don't think on Friday, well, I need permission by Monday. So yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and do it. No. If you're going to do this, you need to plan ahead so that you have time to contact them. Will they answer the first time? Probably not. You have to consistently, request or find somebody else to ask or look up, how you go about getting permission for this person or this copyright. Probably. And then if you do get an agreement, please get everything in writing and document every step that you take along the way. So if somebody comes back and says, well, you don't have permission to use this, you can show them, yes, this is what I've done. Here's the agreement that we have that's in writing. Okay. So let's look here at the permissions one. It's really not a checklist like the others were, but it does give you some really nice steps to follow to go through this. And the first one I thought was really one that I hadn't even think of. Find out if it does need permission. A lot of things are in the public domain and you don't need to ask permission for that. But then if you do, then find out who the owner is and go through these 5 steps, and they detail what to do down here. So you can go through that on your own and see, if this is the right way to go for you. So we've got Teach Act, which is one way of using copyright material, fair use, and then asking permission. Now, how to avoid copyright issues: create your own material. Then you are the owner of the copyright and you can use it the way you want. If that means graphics or images or content, create it yourself and you're home free. Otherwise, I've got 3 links here that are public domain archives. So Project Gutenberg, all kinds of textbooks, all kinds of books in general that are in the public domain and do not need permission to use. The Internet Archives has everything from movies to TV commercials to old computer programs, just about anything you can think of, they've archived there, things that are in the public domain. And same thing with Wikipedia Commons. A lot of material there that could be used in classroom setting that would work for what we're trying to do. Most of the stuff that the government puts out, data sheets and comparisons and population things and maps and so on, is in the public domain. So that would be a good place to check the National Archives and so on. Using the Creative Commons license. A lot of things people are putting out with the Creative Commons license, and there's different types of licensing depending on how they want their material to be used. So you can click on that link to find out what the different types are and how you can use them. Or you can watch the video that's next here, Creative Commons in Plain English, which kind of explains how you would go about getting permission if somebody has put their material in the Creative Commons licensing. Again, if you're going to link to websites that have the information that you want, that's a good idea, because then you're not using their stuff directly. You're linking to the site that they have their stuff on. But it's, again, still a good idea to ask permission to link to their material. And then I created this one a few years ago, a lot of open educational resources, which are either free and open, or they are under the Creative Commons license. And I put those in by subject matter, so you could look up different open educational resources for science or math or English. And then now I just listed a number of additional resources, just different things about copyright, Creative Commons, the OER again, and then these next two, the Copyright and Teaching Guide and the COVID Copyright and Courses, both from the University of Minnesota, is what kind of got me started on this quest. It was to, as I was reading through those, I was thinking, oh yeah, that's kind of important. We should be talking about that, or we should have something in place that deals with that. And then some resources from the copyright community, from different publishers about how they are responding to the COVID crisis and what they're doing to help educators with publishing rights and copyright licensing and so on. And as we get more and more back to normal, some of this stuff is going to change, and they're not going to be as free and open with what they're doing, because their whole thing is to make money off of this. So got to be careful about what you're using now may not be what you can use later without permission. And then after this morning's seminar or webinar, I started putting together some examples of what different K-12 school districts have for their copyright policies, and I'm finding not a lot out there. So if you would like, right now it's just open to anybody with the link can view. But what I would like is, if your district or you know of other examples, please ask me permission for edit rights, and I'll have you add those to what we are doing here. I've got some on there. I've made some comments, kind of a brief overview of what each one talks about and deals with and so on. But if you want to add to that, please ask for permission to edit, and I will give that to you. And then Janelle Herman from our district this morning talked about the DCMP, which is a lot of content that is out there and is accessible, but it's described and it's closed captioned. And you do have to sign up for it, and they have a few steps for you to get permission to use it. But it's a great resource that she said for finding some of the videos that her health classes and so on were looking for and couldn't find anymore, yet there they were. So a good resource. And then two more brief videos that talk about copyright basics and a fairy tale use, or a use tale. That one is very cute at first, because they use a lot of quick Disney clips to talk about copyright, but after a while it kind of gets annoying. And then my disclaimer at the bottom, I am not a lawyer, so this is not advice that you can take and say, hey, he said this. But after reading all this stuff, you know, kind of get that feeling. So that's all I have. What I'd like to do is just open it up for comments or questions or sharing, whatever you want to do here. I will stop sharing my screen, and we can go back to just discussing. So I don't have to do any talking anymore. Was I muted the whole time? Or John, did you do that?
Yes, I muted you early on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We've just been looking at you.
But we were looking attentively.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah.
So Any comments?
I've got a question. I think I know the answer, but just fun to still poke it around. So I'm a music teacher. So what I get is, how much of a YouTube clip can I use or something like that? So I know that I've heard things like, well, up to 2 minutes or something. But, if you're going to show a performance of something, you're not going to, I do have a pet in the background. I'm so sorry. Hope that bird is not driving you crazy. I do have, you can't stop a performance in the middle and really bother to share it. What's the point of that? So that drives me crazy when I hear that. Just 2 minutes.
Well, I can share this, that my son has an Instagram account that he uses some video that he creates, but he uses some songs as background for it. And their main thing is about 30 seconds. So he took 30 seconds of the song and posted it and got dinged for it. So he went to look on TikTok, and TikTok actually said you can only use 15 seconds of that song. So once he knew that, then he started looking on TikTok first for his sources to find out how much he could use online, and then doing that for his Instagram posts. But 15 seconds is not a lot of time. And I've heard that 2 minutes also, but even that, a clip from a 3.5, 4 minute song is really not a lot. But how are they using it? Or can they use a song that has creative license? Some of those things where iMovie has a collection of music that you can use that is copyright free, or there are other resources where you can get copyright free music. It won't be Beyonce, it won't be whoever that the kids are listening to, but it can be sorted by style or mood or any of those other types of things. It just won't be a current star that they're listening to and want to use in their presentation.
Well, I found it interesting, Mark. You were streaming. I was helping last spring. I was helping my daughter's piano teacher and one of my elementary music people is helping them stream their piano recitals. Right, it's springtime, end of the season. They've got piano recitals, and each kid and their parent came in and they did their little thing, and the child and parent left and what have you. And the one on Saturday, the recital, I recorded the whole thing, but it got stopped about 20 minutes into the recital for copyright violation. And I forget what song the kid was playing, but it was not a song that I was aware of. I have no idea who the people were. The next day, we had apparently the kids didn't play as well because their songs were unrecognizable by YouTube. No copyright dings whatsoever.
So if you don't practice, you're rewarded
with a copyright ding.
Yeah.
If you don't practice, you get to play the whole song. Nobody cares.
Well, and I think these are different situations. You're talking about rebroadcasting something. You're talking about, Mark, you're talking about adding audio to something a student's going to produce. I'm talking about just showing something, and that's where it gets that tricky because, if I want to show a YouTube clip of Ella Fitzgerald singing, scat singing or something like that, I still don't necessarily want to just give 15 seconds. They're not going to get the full, thought. So anyway, they're all different scenarios, I realize, but that's the fun of it, it's a fun game to play.
And in my opinion, again, I'm not a lawyer, but in my studies with it and from classes that I've taken about copyright or where they talked about it, as long as you have an educational objective tied directly to it, they'll pretty much let it go.
Well, the next problem comes in if we're recording something for our distance learners, because we rebroadcast that tricky issue again. if you just kept it within your school access, that'd be
Mhm.
fine. But then you have the parents that need to have outside access so they can use their computer at work and their kids with them,
Right, as long as you have that behind an LMS with a password, then it technically should not be a problem.
And if they're accessing it with their student account.
and we can't limit it to that. So that's why we're just like pulling our hair out. We're going, look, we're putting all these safeties in place and we still can't use them, but
Yeah.
I could go on with frustrations, but
Oh, yeah.
that's one of them.
Definitely. So
But
if
as
you
long-
solve that one, let me know.
Yeah. And I think the long and short of it is, as long as we can, I don't believe that any organization is going to come in and say, you have to cease and desist showing this movie of where the red fern grows because it's tying to your classroom activities. I just can't believe they're going to tell you you can't in these kind of settings, you can't even put it online and do that or link to it. Now, when you've got a actual example I can offer, a music teacher showing Millennium Man right before Christmas. And her reason was not that we just needed nothing else to do right before Christmas because we've done our songs, or we've done all of our recitals before Christmas. We don't have anything to do until after Christmas. Her reason was that Millennium Man was really passionate about becoming human, and we're really passionate about being singers.
Not so much.
I was so uncomfortable with that. It was like, no, just don't do it. And she was.
I do give links a lot. It's just that for a little kid, is way different, a first grader, than my sixth grader. So my kids can't even find their lessons, and it's how many months into the school year, and they still say, I couldn't find your posting, and you don't even know where to go with this anymore, and you get no support from anybody else to try to get these kids on board. But yeah, so but that's how the workaround is. We just either try to show smaller snippets or give the links, but and it's just hard for little kids to follow links, right? Their use of technology is so forced upon them right now.
Right.
Well, and you talk about streaming stuff. We were streaming a basketball game. I think it was up in East Central, or was it volleyball? Whatever. It was a sporting event, and they had music playing in the background before the game started, and they were shut down.
Yep.
Now, easy way around that: don't stream popular music. You can't stream Pandora. It's not allowed. There are websites that allow you to stream stuff like Mark. There's a public stuff. In fact, I found for like the theater, my wife works at the local theater. They can't stream music in the lobby before show. Unless they can buy performance rights to do that. But I found a site that was basically it's software, or it's songs designed for that particular purpose. And I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
And you're muted.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, yeah, it's because they bought a ticket for that, and they're making money on that, and that's where you lose it. Or the minute you rebroadcast something, once you get over the first hurdle of you think you can use it in the first place, then you have to look at, but you can't turn around and make any money off it or rebroadcast it, and that's pretty easily done. Like I said, I just mostly get hung up with, it's just hard to work with my little kids because, it's hard to say, well, we're going to do this in class, but you can't at home. Sorry. But we're figuring it out. It's just, like I said, just use links, and I try to help teach the kids how to use hyperlinks. That's all you can do.
Yes.
But
it's challenging because I think what you're saying is you're trying to make it easier for the kids and the families that are younger, but by following the rules, more difficult?
Well, so I don't know I know, Mark, you're in Chisago here, but so say my little first graders have to use a Kindle as their device. It's already too small to manipulate anyway. Then they have to figure out how to learn how to get onto their Seesaw or whatever platform we're using. Then they have to navigate a bunch of folders to find the right day and the right, whatever, the right lesson. Then they find your video, they watch your video, but then you have to you can't incorporate what you want to show in your video because that's rebroadcasting, because I have to give outside link access to outside my district, which we just talked about. So I have to put a separate link for these little kids. I'm lucky if they can find the lesson, let alone then figure out how to find multiple things on that lesson, So yeah, you have to be creative. And yes, there's just some things I can't do and I can live with that. But that's just my world of copyright, I'm not in the upper grades worried about copyright of, performing music. I make sure to use stuff that we have rights to, but that's easily done. But that's just my world. But
I feel the pain.
I want out of this. How about you guys?
Yeah,
You're getting out of it.
let's go back.
Yeah. Love this distance stuff. It's crazy. But we're making it work. So
Best we can.
Mark, just out of curiosity, what do you teach?
I was a
Or are
choir
you-
director for 34 years and then retired from that and went into technology and been doing that as my second career for Chisago. So
My daughter's up at your high school. So I was just wondering if she'd ever have run into you or whatever. So we live in Chisago.
Okay, I retired in 2008 from the classroom, and I had middle school choir and general music and.
Then some of the pains here.
Oh yes, been there, done that, but I didn't have what we're dealing with now.
Yeah.
In the classroom, and that just amazes me what our music staff is doing to get the kids involved and participating and growing, and so I'm impressed.
Can I be nosy and just ask, like, Whitney, like, what do you do? I'm just curious because I'm not a regular classroom teacher. What hangups do you have with copyright? Because what are you doing with it? Yeah, I'm just curious.
I'm not doing anything with it right now. I'm not a classroom teacher. I'm in Chisago as well. I taught 6th grade in Wisconsin for several years, and then I came over to Chisago. This is my 4th year here. So I'm a tech integrationist in one of our elementary buildings.
Super.
So I don't directly deal with it. But yeah, it's something obviously for
Yeah,
us all
I
to
know where
think
you are.
about.
I live like 2 blocks from you. I know where you're working right now.
I'm
Yep.
here. Yeah.
Yep. That's fun though.
Yeah.
How about you, John?
And John works at ECMEC. And so I kind of facilitate all this kind of fun stuff.
But in your past lives, you've been what?
In distant past, I was the media tech director in Ogilvy, and I taught shop. As you can see, I'm good at bleeding. Notice it started bleeding again. It's all over my pants.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Small cuts, lots of blood. So.
I have that problem, but it's the new dog that you heard. Yeah, I'm one of those thousands of people that got a COVID dog, right? But